Hey everyone, this is Oscar from Underdog, and it's been a few months since I did my Techno Rumbles Mastery video. This was one of my videos that was particularly well received by everyone, and so I thought maybe today what we'd do is we'd take it one step further. If you watch that video, what you might recall is that in that video we take a kick drum, playing something pretty predictable, pretty standard, maybe just 1, 2, 3, 4. And we use that kick drum sound as a source to create secondary layers that pulse and swirl around it. We call those secondary layers the rumble, and it kind of plays off the kick drum, making the whole thing sound like one massive unit. An example of rumble was when you start with a kick like this, then you can add secondary layers like this, and refine those secondary layers until they get more and more complex and interesting. Like this was the intermediate level, and this was the mastery level. In the Rumbles video, I did this tasty little diagram summarizing how to get to a result like this. And this is already pretty damn powerful, but I kept referring to this as sound sculptures. So you are a sculptor sculpting the sound around the kick drum. And today I want to take that even further. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a rumble and we're going to output it as audio. So we're going to save this thing as an audio loop. And we're going to load it into any tool that can slice it up and trigger those slices individually. I'm going to build on some techniques that I explain in the pseudo-organic percussion video here. But really what we're going to do is we're going to set ourselves up with a kind of a random pattern generator and feed that into the sliced rumble that's coming out of our slicer device. So what we really need are two tools. One is a slicer device. Some good examples of this are Ableton's simpler device in slice mode, or Reason's mimic device. And then we also need a sequencer to feed notes into that slicer device, and preferably a sequencer that allows us some amount of randomization. So we don't have to intentionally click everywhere. We can sort of generate patterns, maybe within some controlled parameters. In Ableton, there are quite a few Max for Live devices that can do this. And in Reason, you can use the pattern mutator device. You can substitute out any of these tools for equivalent tools and get the same result. And you can even use the Reason tools inside of Ableton if you like, because they come as a VST. I am a Reason ambassador now, so I'm going to use the Reason tools. And if you want to follow along exactly the way I do it, the easiest way is to just get a monthly subscription for about $20 a month. There's an affiliate link in the description. But like I said, use whatever tools you have and let's get into it. So the first key step is to generate yourself some rumbles. Now, if you know you're going to be using this beyond rumbles process, you actually have a lot of creative liberty to go completely nuts with the sound design of your rumbles. You don't have to worry too much about it being balanced because the actual sound technical part is going to come later. What I did, for example, was I was experimenting a lot with Decimort, D16's Decimort, which is a bit crusher VST, and I really love that VST. And so what I was trying to do was I was just trying a whole bunch of different sound textures, pushing them through there with really aggressive bit crushing qualities. I just wanted to feel that aggression of heavy bit crushing. And so the results of that generated some rumbles that probably, to my taste, are a bit too hard or raw to use just like this in a track. For example, this or this. Now, I do really like the attitude of what came out. I like the feeling of it somewhat. It's just not, to my taste, ready to go into a track. So let's use the Beyond Rumble technique on this. So as you can see, I bounced these to audio, right? And so now I have this audio file that I can put into a slicer, and I'm going to use Mimic in this case. So in Reason, I would just create a new device, which is the Mimic device. It's automatically going to generate a new mix channel for me. And you can see Mimic is this kind of multi-sampler instrument. And it comes with a sample loaded. And that's actually not the kind of behavior that I want. I want my device to be completely empty, to be completely vanilla, so I can put whatever I want in there. I'm never really going to use this default sound. So in Reason, under the preferences, there's a little checkbox that you can check to make sure that every time that you load a new device, it's just going to be initialized. It's just going to start from its start. And then you can choose if you want to load a preset or load a particular sound in there. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to load in this entire loop as a sample, and I'm going to set it to slice mode. So now different keys on the keyboard are going to trigger different slices of this rumble loop. And this now gives me the potential to create entirely new rhythmical structures that weren't really possible in the original method. So now I just need to find a way to send in a cool sequence that's going to give me a particular feeling. But playing it on the piano might work. I mean, it might work, try it out. But what I'm looking for is to work with a sequencer that can generate random patterns of notes so that I can kind of hit randomize several times and then just kind of listen and feel if it feels right or not, and then start tweaking from there. So in this case, I'm going to use Reason's pattern mutator. What you do in pattern mutator is you play a pattern of notes and then you tweak the parameters and then you hit mutate, and it's going to generate a secondary derivative pattern that's somewhat different from the original, but not too different. And so if I play, I believe it's C1 a couple of times and a few notes above it, this is going to trigger a whole bunch of different slices. And so if I then create variations on that, it's going to trigger rhythmical patterns. You can even do this in Ableton if you just put the player device in as a VST and then tap the MIDI out from another Ableton channel. You can feed that MIDI into any Ableton instruments that you might want or any VSTs that you might want. So if I hit mutate a few times, listen to the different patterns or the different styles that come out. Now from here, I'm happy that I used Mimic because it has a whole bunch of tweaking possibilities, particularly, for example, the envelope per slice. So what I can do is every time that one of these slices gets triggered, instead of playing the entire slice, we can trigger it to just get loud for a moment and then quiet, almost like a completely fresh new percussive hit. If you are a little bit unclear about what envelopes are, do check out this synthesis video here and this synthesis video here, because it's not super complicated, but you just need someone to explain it to you in a chill way one time. Speaking of explaining things in a chill way one time, I did a Foundations of Electronic Music course, which goes into all these concepts like envelopes and things like this in a structured, systematic way, and you can find it right here. So I can continue hitting the random button. I can continue shaping the sound in various ways until I get a groove that's really cool. So I've managed to combine the feeling of that original bit crushed sound that I thought was super cool, and I've created this sound sculpture derived from a sound sculpture. So really I feel like this is really my sound. This is not a sound that I got from a sample pack. This is not something that I got from a synthesizer. It's something that I have created over various iterations using my taste and intuition. And that's pretty motivating to me. I really like the feeling of that. At this point, you're going to see that we're also getting more rhythmically complex. We're probably going to go away from the 4 on the floor pattern. So 4 on the floor is just when you take one bar and you go kick drum, kick drum, kick drum, kick drum. It's a very stable, predictable pattern that works really well on dance floors. And so a lot of music uses this pattern. However, music can be a lot more than that if you explore some of the more rhythmical variations on this. Often people would refer to these other kind of beats as break beats or broken beats. And what comes out of there can be super fun. However, it can also be a little bit disorienting. So let's talk for a second about what's happening musically. What you're creating is a loop that has a certain length to it before it starts again. And the most typical length for a loop like this is 16/16th notes. That's one bar. That's the length of 1, 2, 3, 4. You can divide that into 16 equal pieces, and that's 16/16th notes. That's the usual length for a loop to be. But you certainly don't have to limit yourself to that. You can also make a loop that's shorter or that's longer. This might not be the most DJ-friendly way to make your music because DJs often appreciate things that do kind of follow the invisible rule of having this 16/16th notes. But remember, you're the artist, you can do whatever you want. And so maybe try and see what it feels like at different lengths, because if you repeat those lengths over and over and over again, they can start to sound right, they can start to feel right, and it can give you access to an entirely new palette of feelings than just that 1, 2, 3, 4.
Simplify. 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 Simplify.
Now in every rhythmical loop, there is intuitively somewhere in there a beginning, a downbeat, a start, the point where your head nods for the first time in the loop. When you hit randomize on one of these sequencers, the pattern that comes out, it's going to intuitively have a downbeat somewhere in there, but not necessarily on the first beat. And so you might, after the fact, need to resample what you've done and move the downbeat on your grid so that it makes sense on your grid. Or you may need to move the MIDI notes around a little bit. But either way, I don't want you to get confused. I want you to make it clear in your mind where the downbeat is and find a way to get that downbeat somewhere on your grid where it lines up on the one, so that when other instruments start their patterns, they all start at the same time. You're also probably going to want to complement this loop with some high percussion, and you can just use typical techno techniques for this, like putting a hi-hat on the upbeat or putting a 16th note hi-hat on every 16th note. These are just some starting points, but if you have a very unpredictable low-end groove, maybe you can get away with a little bit more stable high-end so that people can hold on to the rhythm of that while the low-end is very unpredictable. Sound technically as well, the result of what you're going to get might be a little bit chaotic and unpredictable. It might have too much low end or too much high end or too much low mids or something like this. And for this, I recommend that once you like the musical pattern of what's coming out, at some point you reference with a reference track, and that way you can achieve tonal balance more confidently. If what I just said is a little bit alien to you, watch this video right here and this video right here, because they go into some of the pitfalls that you can get into when you make something that's a little bit weird. Now, as usual, feel free to draw on the techno palette of sounds like the 303 or other things and start adding textures to this. And I hope this method opens up a whole new world of rhythm for you. Come to our Discord channel to share what you've done. Like the video if you found this helpful, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit the little bell icon. And until next time, stay producing, be good to one another, and take care. Bye-bye.